Welcome to another edition of the Insider Mailbag. I'm Jared Johnson, and leading up to a Texas Tech's matchup against NC State, they're out in Raleigh, North Carolina. We have several really good questions from inside the Red Raider subscribers, so I'm going to dive right into these questions. First one comes from Turtle Biscuit Boss, who asked, he says, it felt like Tech's defense won the game against Houston. He said, when was the last time we could say that? And should we expect Tech's defense to play that good every week? Well, first off, I mean, you could look back to the bowl game last year when Texas Tech's defense really did a number on Mississippi State's offense and Mike Leach's offense, which, boy, I don't know. That just seemed to do wonders in terms of exercising those demons of, Mike Leach and the way he was fired and all the drama and Tech's futility since he left. That was just a huge game for so many reasons. The momentum going into the offseason, just the defense playing as good as it did. I mean, that whole telecast, the announcers kept reminding us that Mississippi State had so many players out on defense. So Texas Tech's offense, which was tremendous. And oh, by the way, quarterback Donovan Smith was offensive MVP of that game. And we'll talk about him later in the mailbag. But the defense just really shut down Mississippi State's offense, which wasn't missing a lot of players. So that was the last time I remember, like, wow, this defense, I mean, they won the game. I mean, Tech ended up crushing Mississippi State, but they didn't have to have that great of an offensive performance because the defense played so well and really held Mississippi State down. So while they looked great against Houston, they really did. They did much better than just the 30 points allowed because the offense with all the turnovers really put the defense in some poor situations. Not to mention there was a pick six for Houston. But it has happened. This group, largely this group, and they lost some guys, but a lot of them returned from that bowl team. They're back, So we've seen them do it before. Now, in terms of moving forward, do I expect them to play that good? Every week, no, but I think it's a solid defense. I don't think it's a great defense. I'm not even prepared to say it's a very good defense, but it is a solid defense with veteran players. It has more depth than it has in a long time. It's bigger than it's been for a long time. And the defensive coordinator, Tim DeRuyter, is an experienced, accomplished play caller and coordinator. So I can't say that I'm surprised that they're playing well. I just think it's, once you watch enough football, if you follow Texas Tech for long enough, you have a healthy skepticism when it comes to defense, especially, this century. So there's always that. But no, this is a solid defense. How good it could be, we'll find out. I think some of it's just going to depend on how healthy it stays. But yeah, veteran, deeper, and bigger than what we're used to. Next question comes from Afros53, who says, do I know how many more years for the extra COVID year to be in place? 1, 2, or none? Thanks. Yeah, basically everyone who played during that COVID year, which was the 2020 season, gets an extra year. So basically that's going to be in effect for the next, 3 seasons? Because you're talking about true freshmen in the 2020 season. So it could be the next 3 or 4 seasons. You could see guys that were true freshmen that year, redshirt, get the COVID year. So really 6 seasons. So what would that be? I'm no math major, but the 2025 season. So it's going to be in effect for a while. And what's interesting, and this is something that's very confusing, unnecessarily confusing, but the Big 12 voted on how to do classification, like how to list them on the roster. And basically the Big 12, and this was something that Texas Tech didn't agree with, by the way, decided to list them like by ignoring that extra COVID year of eligibility. So basically, it's why you see scenarios where a guy's listed as a senior on the roster, but he still might have 2 seasons of eligibility remaining. Which is crazy. So it's confusing. COVID has confused everything, basically that whole era of existence, not just in football, obviously, or college sports. But yeah, it's going to be around for a little bit. But I would say after the 2025 or 26 season, that should be done. All right, Cotton Money has another question. This is a good one. He says he's noticed almost every team has a player wearing zero. What's up with that? Is it a new fad? Well, it is kind of a new fad, but basically that was the number 0 wasn't allowed up until I think in 2020. That was the first season it was allowed. The NCAA Rules Committee decided to allow the number 0 to be used, and their reasoning was a population of basically players wanting to wear single digits, and there being so many of them. So this gives you another number, or actually gives you 2, one on offense and one on defense, where players can wear the number 0. So that was the reasoning behind it. I don't really have a problem with it, other than I don't care about guys wearing number 0, but my dad, I remember he used to always say, like in basketball, why would you ever wear number 0? That you're, it's basically saying you're worth nothing. I never really looked at it that way, but I think there's a lot of people who do. Why would you wear number 0? So, let's see, Rashad Williams is number 0 on defense for Texas Tech. I don't know if there's a guy who's number 0 on offense. I should know that, but there might be. But anyways, yeah, number 0 is a thing in college football now. It has been since they agreed to it in 2020. All right, From Syntax wants to know, is Donovan Smith the reason opponents are able to stay in the game, and is it also the reason why Texas Tech's able to stay in the game as well? No, okay, that's I guess a cute way of saying he kept Houston in the game last week, and he did, those 3 interceptions. I think it's not just him, but I think Texas Tech's offensive line is going to allow opponents to stay in the game because of negative plays and just how everybody reacts to that. The offensive line play is so important. We know that. Just like I think Donovan Smith could help his offensive line out some by getting rid of the ball at times, quicker than he does, and moving around the pocket a little bit. He's obviously very elusive. He's a good runner and all that, but there is an art form to moving around the pocket, even if you're not a mobile quarterback. And I think some of that's experience. So, like I said earlier in this show, Donovan Smith was the MVP of the Liberty Bowl when Texas Tech dismantled Mississippi State. He helped Texas Tech upset Iowa State to become bowl eligible. He's a very clutch player. What I saw him do in Friendship in high school, where he carried that team to some big wins, including over Lubbock Cooper, he kept Houston in by those 3 interceptions. Those were bad plays. It turns out he's not a robot. He's a human being. And he's a redshirt sophomore, so he's relatively young, but he does have some experience. I think ultimately the body of work I've seen from him, both high school and then last season at Texas Tech, and then even last week against Houston, is when plays are needed to be made in clutch situations, Donovan Smith has stepped up time and time again. So I would say he's a very good fit in terms of the way this team has showed some resiliency and ability to fight and do a better job in close games. Then again, he can't turn the ball over he can't throw 3 interceptions. I don't care how bad the offensive line is. Pick 6 was a bad throw. That deep throw when they were backed up on their goal line was another terrible play. When they play better teams than Houston, it will cost Texas Tech. So I don't care how clutch he is or how well he plays after that. He can't throw 3 interceptions, on a regular basis. And we haven't seen him do that a lot. He hadn't thrown a lot of interceptions prior to the game against Houston. So ultimately my answer to you is I think he does a lot more good than bad. There's a lot of room for improvement, and I think his ceiling is very high. Ultimately, I think he's going to help Texas Tech win more games than he's going to cost them. Jay Terrell wants to know what my biggest surprise on each side of the ball has been this far. Yeah, I don't know if it's a surprise, but I am happy, for one, that Texas Tech has been able to get consistent pressure on quarterbacks so far. I think that's the biggest difference. Now, I mentioned the depth, the size, and this probably ties along with Tim DeRuyter, the defensive coordinator, but Texas Tech has affected the quarterback more, and it's against Murray State and Houston, so the schedule's going to get tougher. We'll see how they do this week against NC State, and Devin Leary, a good quarterback, and who I think NC State brings back 4 starters. They lost a really good player off their offensive line from last year, but it's considered a good offensive line, a veteran offensive line, so we'll see how Tech's defensive front, and his defense does in terms of getting consistent pressure on Leary. But that's been the biggest pleasant surprise for me. I knew they had a good defensive line. I was familiar with Tim DeRuyter's history in terms of him doing that and having success on defense and that being a part of it. But still, seeing Texas Tech actually make it happen has been great. And if they continue that this year, just like I said, the offensive line could keep other teams in the game. I think the defensive line, and not just that, the whole defense, the way they bring pressure from all over the place, and they've been able to consistently affect the quarterback, can keep Texas Tech in a lot of games this year. So that's been a pleasant surprise. Now, in terms of offense, I don't know about a surprise. I guess I'll say Dennis Wilburn. Just from the beginning of this offseason, I barely knew of his existence. I mean, I knew he came over and all that, but I wasn't really figuring him in the competition. And then he did some things in spring, but though he wasn't even the starter, then by the time fall camp started, he was clearly competing with Cade Briggs for the starting center spot. And then by the time fall camp ended, he was clearly the starting center. And, while the offensive line has struggled overall, I don't think he's been terrible. He hasn't been great, but I haven't looked at Wilburn in rewatching the games. I haven't looked at him and been like, he's really costing them. And we haven't been talking about poor snaps. We haven't been talking about a lot of it's been more like the team getting beat by good players, especially against Houston, than them missing an assignment, a guy just running free, stuff like that. So I think Dennis Wilburn has been okay. It's hard to say he's been great with the way the offensive line's played overall, with him being the anchor there at center. But he's been a surprise for me in terms of it's rare that there's somebody that just comes out of nowhere, even to start an offseason, and plays such a pivotal role at such a pivotal position for me with Texas Tech, to be quite honest. But that's what Dennis Wilburn has done. So it'll be interesting to see how he progresses and how much he improves. 78 Tech has a roster question. He said he read a roster for this week with Shuck being a third-team QB. He says he believes he reads it this week as well. How is this possible? Yeah, that's just listing him. I mean, basically your quarterbacks are that would actually play are Donovan Smith and Baron Morton. Shuck is not available to play. I mean, he's going to be out at least past the Texas game, if not longer. Really, I don't expect him, just based on what I've heard. I'm no doctor, but really, I think the earliest you'd see him would be the second half of the season, after the bye. You play your first 6 games, and then there's a bye, because that'd be a good time to get him back. I don't know if that would be the case, but they said at least 3 to 6 weeks, so that's past the Texas game. That's anything earlier than that. I think that's unrealistic, but that's just them listing him there. That's not. Ignore that is my best advice. This is an interesting question. It's a challenging question, so in my opinion, it's a good question. Syntax Red Raider wants to know, so far, what's the major thing with this coaching staff that I would change and why? I'm a big fan of this coaching staff. I've known a lot of these guys for a while, and the guys I haven't, who I've gotten to know, and at least who I've observed in several practices, and then interviewing them, hearing them talk to other people, all those things, talking to other people in the media from cover other teams who I respect their opinion and what they tell me about these guys. I am a huge fan. I think it's a very good coaching staff, and not just as recruiters, not just as in team development or player development, but all of it. It's a very solid coaching staff. The one thing that I would say where I was kind of like, ugh, and this is minor, I don't know that I would necessarily change it, but I've really gone philosophically in football from, and this may be sacrilegious around these parts in Raiderland, but I'm really away from the finesse air raid type. And now Zach Kitley will tell you this isn't a pure air raid, and that's fine. It looks like an air raid to me. Very similar principles. And I get it, and it's successful. And Zach Kitley was the 24/7 Sports National Offensive Coordinator of the Year, and I think Texas Tech's going to put up a lot of points this year. And I think he's a bright young mind. But just for me, philosophically, personally, I just think football is cyclical. And I think the trend and what could be most successful against the way defenses are fielded right now, the alignments, the body types of like linebackers and such, I think going back to more of a power running style, still a spread. You still spreads here to stay, but in terms of being able to load up in 12 personnel with a couple tight ends and stuff like that, I mean, really do it. I mean, Tech says they can do it and they will do it, but I mean, where that's a big part of your offense, where you're going to line up and run over guys and take advantage of these linebackers that look like safeties used to be. I just, that's where I would like. So when they brought in Zach Kitley, I was really excited because he is such a respected guy. He's had so much success so early in his career, and I know they're going to have some success. I just think going back to a more physical brand of football right now is the way to go. And now they could still be physical. I'm not saying they're not necessarily, but it is a finesse, a lot of screen, a lot of aired out, run 100 plays, that kind of thing. And that's just not, again, this is really nitpicking because overall, and y'all know I have no problem criticizing coaching staffs. I will do it. Just look at the history here inside the Red Raiders and RaiderPower.com and all that. But just being honest, I really like this coaching staff. I like the direction of the program right now. Not just Joey McGuire, but a lot of the staff, even the support staff behind the recruiting effort, all of it. It's going in a really positive direction. But you asked me the question, my answer is I would like a more physical brand of offense, a more power running type style. And then play action and all that stuff. I still want passing game. I mean, come on, it's 2022. You still got to throw it around the yard. But less of a finesse, more of a power style would be my choice. But with that, great round of questions as always from inside the Red Raiders subscribers. Texas Tech has a big game coming up against number 16 NC State, 6 p.m. Central Time there in Raleigh, North Carolina. Expected to be a sellout there at Carter Finley Stadium. The game will be televised on ESPN2. Can't wait to see what happens. But for now, that'll do it. Thanks for watching, and until next time.